YouTubers love to do unboxings. It's the kind of part one of many product reviews they will do. Equipment arrives and the YouTuber gives the viewer a first look at the gear they're about to review. A reveal, if you will. For podcasters like us, the unboxing is just not part of our jam. But Fatty, you and I received some boxes recently, and what was in them is worth talking about.
It certainly is, and I'm hoping that you will put some sound behind this of tape being ripped off and boxes, cardboard on cardboard sound. We got some new protection from our friends at Laser Helmets. Laser has a new technology called Kineticore, and they want to make sure Leadville racers know about it. Kineticore is an impact control system. It's like MIPS, but better. Let's say it's better. And it's designed in-house by the Laser team.
I got my first look at Kineticore at Sea Otter. There are several models that get the Kineticore treatment, and 3 in particular that this audience should consider. I got the mountain bike version of the Kineticore helmet. That's the Jackal. It is the only crossover from Laser's MIPS lineup.
Right, and I received the Strata. It's a fully vented helmet, good for long days on the bike in warm conditions. That should sound familiar to anyone who's going to be racing Leadville. The Strata is a new model for Laser, and as we've established, it has Laser's Kineticore inner wall. Kineticore, like MIPS, helps reduce rotational forces on impact, but unlike MIPS, Kineticore does this without adding that extra layer you'll find in a MIPS-equipped helmet.
The third helmet Leadville racers should look at with Kineticore is the Vento. It is aero for fast Leadville racers looking for those marginal gains that could help them get a big buckle. Regarding fit, I can tell you that Kineticore helmets offer a little more room than a MIPS helmet. So check to make sure your current size is a good match for a Laser Kineticore model. It should be. And by the way, if you like MIPS, Laser is keeping a full lineup of MIPS helmets too.
Yeah, I will note that I actually do wear different size Laser helmets based on whether it's MIPS or Kineticore, because my head, a 58 centimeter noggin, is right on the dividing line between medium and large. So for MIPS, I'm wearing large. For Kineticore, I'm wearing medium.
So that's our version of a podcast unboxing. As we get our Kineticore equipped helmets out on rides, we will tell you more about them. For now, check out the Kineticore models we revealed here and the full Laser lineup at lasersport.com.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Shimano. You can find them at bike.shimano.com. It is Season 5, Episode 8 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I am Michael Houghton, hiding the most.
And I am Fatty. Our tires are back on pavement for a bit as we head toward the pipeline. We're going to hopefully do some pace lining. This is one of the shortest segments on the course, but it is strategically very important.
You don't mind if I stop at the fish hatchery, do you? No. I'd like to take a look at some trout before we get too deep into this thing. We also get into the mental game in our Leadville prep, but this is not something Fatty and I will try and talk you through. We have a real professional on hand who knows something about endurance sports and sports psychology. And since we're on pavement here, we're going to try to hold speed. And that means it's a good time to talk about that jersey you are wearing. In fact, next time you are on a ride, take a quick look at yourself. What we are hoping you see is something fairly tight and smooth with very few wrinkles.
I hope you're not talking about my face here, but I agree. Looking good, it's important. Looking good makes you feel good, and you want to feel good in this race, obviously. Having a properly fit jersey that's not all sloppy or bunched up can get you in a nice positive frame of mind. And that is what a DNA jersey can do for you. They have cuts to match your body type and fabrics that stay in place.
You're right on that appearance thing, but it's not totally what we're going for here. I'm actually focused on performance. You know, I heard our friend, Chief Marginal Gainer and head of Silka, Josh Portner, on another show recently talking about easy aerodynamic gains. And he said the easiest way is your jersey. He said you want to be in something that is like a second skin. as tight as you can put up with, and with fabric that is without wrinkles or very few. This is all about airflow, folks, and making sure it is not disrupted by the thing that the air is having a hard time getting around, and that is your upper body.
And some of us have more of that upper body to get around than others. Regardless, this is why we point our listeners to DNA's BioFit jersey. It hugs the upper body to get that slick, aero, marginal gain our friend Josh talks about. There are other marginal gains you can get through clothing, surprisingly, socks being one of them, but the jersey is tops, no pun intended. And, well, maybe it was intended. DNA's BioFit jersey will save watts as you motor on the pavement toward the pipeline.
The BioFit is available in the custom program. To check out the BioFit jersey and the full DNA lineup, go to dnacycling.com.
Every part of this course kicks you in the teeth.
This is the course where we are talking you through what you need to do to have the best possible day, August 13th, from the shotgun blast to the moment you roll up to that red carpet and the 105 miles in between.
Now, last time, as a reminder, we took you down the Powerline, outbound. If all goes well on race day, that's over in a flash. Don't worry, you will get another chance to look at this iconic segment of the Leadville 100, and when you do, you will have all the time you need to give it a good hard look.
We are now picking up at mile 23 as you make a right turn onto the pavement, but this is a good time, I think, for a quick overview of this part of the course from turning onto the pavement to under the mat, just over 5 miles. What do we got here, Fatty? I mean, this is a pretty, on paper, kind of boring section, but we should really pay attention.
You definitely want to pay attention because this, I mean, when you consider about 5 miles from turning off of the power line to going under the timing mat at the pipeline, that's 5 miles, but it's going to be both ways. And all of the guidance we have here applies in both directions. So that's 10 miles. That's 10% of the race. Now, in both cases, you're going to start this section at about 9,650 feet in altitude, and you're going to cross the timing mat at the same altitude. So a net difference of nothing. But you are going to continue to oscillate, let's say, 100 feet or so. You're going to be as high as 9,700. You're going to be as low as 9,600. So watch that. As you do the little ups, the little downs, use your gears so that your cadence, your power all stay the same, that you don't wind up blowing yourself up, for a quick 50-foot gain.
Mm-hmm. And as a typical sub-9 finisher, this 5 miles takes Fatty about 20 minutes to do.
Yep.
That really underscores the value of working with a group in this area.
Absolutely true.
Yeah. Want to see the numbers we're looking for at this part or any part of the course? You should check out Fatty's Strava for last year. It's easy to check. Just go to leadville.fm/Strava.
Yep. Made you a short little URL so you can check it out. And it is valuable to see just so you can wander through it and say, okay, here's a pretty, let's call me ordinary sub-9 racer. My numbers are pretty good to look at if that's the time that you are looking for. And anyone can look at it to kind of get a sense of, well, how much altitude is there between here and there and so forth. Anyway, let's talk about this part of the course. As we said a couple of times, it is very strategically important. It's 5 miles, and it is one of the very few places on this course where you can be going fast enough that wind resistance matters. You know how we were talking about being aero during that DNA ad read? It really does matter. 10% of the race is this section, and you don't want to waste your effort on wind resistance here. And besides, of course, wearing a nice tight jersey, working with people is going to be incredibly valuable in getting you from point A to point B as fast and as fresh as possible.
Mm-hmm. We hope you do find a group in this section, and that is the point of this whole discussion, is how to work with a group. But we'll say this real quick, and that is if you do find yourself alone on this paved section, or you're trying to wait for people to join you, or you're trying to catch up to somebody, focus on your aero position here, folks. You want to try to get down lower than maybe normally you would on a mountain bike or a piece of single track. So get your head down a little bit. Try to get your arms tighter if you can, and work on that arrow position. And put on a DNA jersey, that BioFit jersey. It will help.
It does.
But hopefully what you're doing is getting in a group here. And this probably starts even before you've made the right turn onto the pavement. I mean, you're taking inventory of the people around you as you maybe run down that fence line and cross the area of what used to be a creek and then climb right up out of that little lull right there and up onto the pavement. And you start taking a look around and see if there's people ahead of you or folks behind you, or maybe you've already got a group in this area. And you start to form a little group to work along the pavement. So let's talk about putting a good working group together, right? This is the number one most likely place to save some energy and make some time. Like you can not only, work on recovering after this hard descent. The descent is not a rest area. The Powerline descent is not. I mean, it's work up there. So getting on the pavement and making the most out of your energy at this area, and also maintaining and rolling with a little speed is very important here. So again, let's look to do that as you work on this pavement section and hopefully form a group.
Yeah. Now, if you listen to, I think it was season 4, episode 21, my race day recap from last year, you'll notice that when I got onto that, I looked ahead and could not see anyone on the pavement. The way that I was able to form a group was by remembering that there was a guy just a little bit behind me. Of course, it's a race, and it is so hard to ever let someone catch up to you. You feel like you're giving something up, but you are definitely not doing that. If there is nobody in bridgeable distance, 50 feet, 100 feet or so of you, it is definitely more worth it to take a look over your shoulder and say, what if I let the person behind me or the people behind me catch me and I work with them? All of us are going to benefit. So definitely do that. Once you have put a group together, here are a few tips from Hadi and me on what you can do to make sure that that group stays working smoothly, efficiently, happily together. First of all, remember, this is a group of mountain bikers, right? You don't know for sure that the person you are riding next to or right in front of or right behind has any experience at all in working in a group. All you know for sure is that you have both arrived at this point in the race in the same, in the same amount of time. So you're more or less the same fitness, more or less the same strength. Right? So this is someone that you can and should work with. So Hadi, you ride a lot of road. What is some recommendations you would make to have a successful pace line in this 5-mile section of the Leadville 100?
Yeah, this is kind of second nature stuff for roadies. I mean, we ride like this all the time. And for mountain bikers, obviously, who ride more in smaller groups or 2s and 3s or alone, this is, can be new territory. I will tell you this, I've had a lot of luck in this section, or just, maybe it just happens quite a bit there, of finding groups. They seem to form quite nicely there. And if you pay attention, you should be able to jump in one and stay in one fairly easy. But there are some rules to live by here, right? One thing is that you want the group to stay moving. Like having one person sit on the front for the length of this thing is going to do nobody. It certainly won't do the guy on the front any good, and it's not going to do the rest of the group. This group is powered by each individual taking equal pulls. That's what does best. I will say this too. One thing to look out for: if you see a tandem anywhere near you, get with the tandem. These folks motor. You're talking about 2 bikes built into one. We have 4 legs on one bike, and they can really build up some speed. They do a nice job. They're generally great people to be around too. And they will help carry a group along. So find a tandem if you can. I know I've gotten lucky enough to find, I think on 2 occasions, tandems right in this section and stayed with them so they can help you. But again, I think the underlying theme here when you're working in a group is you want to pass the workout equally. Anybody taking a long pull at the front is only going to hurt the group in the end. And each person needs to understand that sitting in and not doing any work is not going to help the group, and going to the front and being a monster also does not help the group. You want the group needs to keep rotating.
Yeah. And what helps a group do that is having someone take charge, someone who sets the ground rules, so to speak. Sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you can happen into a group where everyone seems to understand what to do. More often, people are just looking for someone to say what they ought to do. I am happy to be that person and have had good success just in saying something very simple, like as I sweep people up, and as you get a bigger group, you will sweep more and more people up. Just simply say something like, take 15-second pulls. Don't accelerate off the front. Roll off left to the back. Just be the person who sets those rules. Most people are happy to abide by them because they know that they are they are now part of something that moves so much faster than they could ever do by themselves. Next point would be, as someone, finishes their pull and drops off to the back, be generous, be gregarious, thank them, say, nice pull as they do that. It is so easy to take just a second and appreciate folks for being part of something that is helping your race as well as their race.
Another hot tip, of course, is do not cross wheels. This can bring the whole group down. You want to be close to the rider in front of you, but overlapping wheels, it can get the whole group in trouble. If the person in front of you moves and crosses and clips your wheel, it's almost guaranteed you're going down. So stay close, but not too close is the idea. On the front, when you have finished your turn at the front, which should be no more than 20 seconds, you want to obviously signal to the group, the folks behind you, that you're moving off the front. That's usually done with a flick of an elbow. But you can just yell, I don't care, but do something. Tell the folks behind you, especially the rider right behind you, that you're going to pull off. So that rider is prepared to start rolling forward and take the lead. Now, as far as taking over the lead is concerned, there's no reason to accelerate. In fact, you're going to hurt the group. Accelerations hurt the group. If you accelerate and start picking up speed as you go to the front, that means everyone behind you has to do the same, and you start forming gaps in your pace line. Again, this is going to disrupt your flow on the pace line. So look down. If you've got a bike computer on, examine what speed you're currently rolling and just try to maintain that speed. That's all you're really trying to do. Again, this is why it's so important to not take too long of a pull at the front, because if you start taking too long of a pull, that means you're going to start reducing speed. The group's now going to start bunching up. And then when you do rotate off, the guy right behind you or the lady right behind you suddenly is fresh. They're going to accelerate. Now you're going to get this rubber band effect. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking just for nice, smooth, rotational matter here rolling down the road. And while there's a lot of focus on the front, the calling out, the signaling, that forth, the person at the very end of the train also has a big responsibility here. The person at the tail end of the line, as the rider is backing down the line, in other words, the rider that just took the last pull at the front, as they're backing down, if you're at the tail end of the line, you want to tell that rider, hey, I'm last. I am last. So that rider drifting back knows, okay, I need to get back in the line. Because oftentimes, the hardest part about staying in a pace line is not doing the work at the front, it's getting back in the line, right? Because here comes that train, and you've been going backwards and losing speed, and suddenly you have to accelerate to get back in the line. If you can tell that rider, hey, I'm last, it's going to make it easier for them to fall back in.
And one last thing, and I don't think we can overemphasize this, Hadi, is the best way to get good at something is practice. Find group rides at your local bike shop, or find other mountain bikers perhaps who would like to learn this and work with them. By doing this, you're just going to get better. It doesn't take a lot of time. We know that this is a mountain bike race, but there really is enough riding where you are working in a group in this race that having some experience at being able to modulate your speed without grabbing a handful of brake is a real skill worth having. Okay, so with that in mind, enough about groups. Let's talk about the mile-by-mile details of this 5-mile stretch of the course. So you would think, and I'm going back to where we are just turning off of the dirt onto the pavement. It's mile 23. You'd think that being who we are, we would encourage you to grab a gel, get a drink, instantly. But you would be wrong, because as soon as you make that turn onto the pavement, there's a I don't know if it's 100 feet or 100 yards, but it is a nasty, sharp, steep little kicker that you got to hit. And maybe it just feels that way because your legs haven't really been pedaling that hard for the last 4 miles or so. But Hadi, you remember, I mean, you go from coasting to really having to hit it hard. Be sure to be ready to get into a lower gear. Don't eat quite yet, but then you're going to crest that in less than 1/10 of a mile, I will say. And then, yes, it is time for you to remember to get something to eat, because soon enough, you're going to be putting this group together. And when you're doing that, you're going to want to be watching, the back and butt of the next person, so that and grabbing a gel, grabbing a drink may not be as easy, at least for people who are new to working in a pace line. So grab yourself something to eat as soon as you get over that little kicker right after you get on the pavement.
At mile 23.8, you're going to pass the world-famous fish hatchery. Do not stop. Do not fish. You want to go right by this thing? As much as I love trout fishing. And it's quite a little scene in the fish hatchery if you do have time to go check it out. But not now. You're going to keep rolling here. This is a downhill, and then you're going to bend left. And now's the time. Go ahead, pull the gel out, grab the bottle, get a drink real quick. This is the straightest, flattest mile on the course, but you should be able to, if you've obviously practiced at eating and drinking while riding, this is a fine spot to go for that. And this is also probably the most perfect mile to start working together. Here's where your pace line should start forming up once you've kind of identified your gang. Here's where you can start getting to work.
Now, at mile 25, so just another mile or so, you're going to have a right turn. There's going to be a course marshal who is going to direct you for that. Now, often, I've seen this happen so many times, groups will break up here because some people coast as they make this corner, some people power through, some people take a very tight line, some people take a wide line. It is easy to either lose people or get lost by people. So be ready, hold your speed and be ready to pick up your speed. If for some reason you do get shot off the back a little bit, make the extra effort to get caught back up, because you have another 2 miles of mostly flat paved road now, which is going to take you to mile 27.
Mm-hmm. And at mile 27, you're going to make another right turn and back on the dirt. And I actually like this little double track section. It's kind of cool in there. It's not, it's not typical mountain bikey stuff. There's not any real hills involved, but it's nice double track. For me, I could get why people don't like it too, because it can get a little rough at times and get a little roughed up depending on what ATVs have been out in the weeks or months prior. But there's room to pass here. It's kind of an unusual pass because it's dusty and powdery, and you got this kind of the center hump in the middle. So jostling between the two lines is a little awkward, but if you're a mountain biker, you can handle this. If you don't need to pass, maybe just hang on, because soon you'll be getting into the graded fire road area, and you'll have a no effort area as far as passing opportunities go.
Yeah, absolutely. When you get to mile 28, you are back on this wide dirt road. You're going to look ahead. You're going to see an arch. There is going to be a timing mat. Mile 28, you are just a couple of tenths of a mile away from the pipeline aid station. And when you cross that timing mat, might not be a bad time for you to look down and see how you're tracking against your hoped for finish time. If you look at common finish times for sub 9, 2 hours is a pretty good guess. If you're finishing under 2 hours, you're in good shape, hopefully, if you can keep this up for a sub 9 finish. If you're at about 2 hours and 15 minutes, you're looking at a sub 10. If you are finishing in about 2 hours and 25 minutes, you're on track for a sub 11. And as long as you cross into the pipeline aid station in about 2 hours and 40 minutes or less, you are in great shape for your first or, second or third or 10th or whoever, however many belt buckles. So yeah, if the finish of the Leadville 100 is what you're after, target finishing or crossing this timing mat at around 2 hours and 40 minutes or faster.
This is the first crewing opportunity, by the way, folks. The first real significant aid station is right here at Pipeline. We're going to go into a whole show. In fact, we're going to have a whole show on crewing for race day, but it's a good footnote here about what you should expect, what you might see at this aid station. You could have a crew stationed here, just in case you need something. Faster riders will just tear right through this section. They probably have enough to last them clear to Twin Lakes. But for other folks, and certainly my first time out at Leadville, I did stop here. I got my vest off, pulled some arm warmers off, may have dumped the bottle, can't remember for sure. But this is not a bad spot, especially if you go light away from the start line to pick something up. Fatty, how often have you been able to stay with your group? I mean, we talked about groups here coming on that pavement section. There is a chance to keep your group together here, even though Pipeline kind of naturally diffuses things. But I think this is still a good spot where if you can still identify a few riders maybe out of that big group that you want to stay with, you can do that here as we start to head down the pipeline.
100% agree. I don't understand why, but I swear I lose my group every time in the pipeline. I am trying desperately, honestly, to keep my group, but by the time I come through the crowd, it has just it's dissipated. And I am on my own. And I don't know if I have just sort of dropped back, or if I have, most of them have stopped, or if some people are just, getting their first pee of the day out of the way. But it seems like I lose people. However, on the other side of the pipeline, you are going to see people who either you have ridden with before or that you have not ridden with before. And you're going to be able to put together a new group for this next section very quickly.
And that is the next episode. We'll be heading from Pipeline to the second biggest party on the course, Twin Lakes Dam. That's on the next installment of the course.
Our friends at Envy have gotten really involved in a fun project that is one part Survivor and one part bike event, and a third part Saturday Night Live skit. It is called the All-Terrain Bicycle Challenge. It's sort of a reality game show on bikes staged in the beautiful hills of Vermont, and it's appearing now on YouTube.
Yeah, it's real fun stuff. 5 contestants were picked and brought together. They were each offered a platform on which to build their ATV bikes. So each got a crushed Bombora steel frame with Envy Adventure Fork, Envy Wheels, Envy Bars, and Envy Stem. Now that sounds like they are all on the same bike, but they are not. Contestants could choose between flat bar or drop, 700C or 650B. 2 riders went with flat and 1 with 700s.
I think I'd go with flat. The challenge ride is pretty incredible. 71 miles in the Vermont backcountry and more than 12,000 feet of climbing, which sounds familiar to Leadville racers, right? The riders have to carry their own stuff, so that's why you see their bikes outfitted with a frame and top 2 bags. The contestants come from a variety of backgrounds, including a road racer and one with very little off-road experience and a rider who is missing a hand.
Yeah, the series is hosted by Ronnie Ultramomance. He's a terrific character known for his adventures and riding in his sandals. He has the perfect tongue-in-cheek approach to hosting this thing. You can check out all the All-Terrain Bicycle Challenge episodes on Envy's YouTube channel. And for the gear the contestants are riding, it's envy.com. That's ENVE.com. Fatty, I saw a quote the other day that seems appropriate for this show and the guest we have up next. Here goes. Make sure your worst enemy doesn't live between your ears. Self-doubt kills dreams. You are more capable than you think. Now, that sounds probably a little like Ken Klober, but it is not. It comes from a professional baseball player, Chris Bryant, who really understands the mental game.
Yeah, and some terrific advice for all of us who have had some pretty lengthy conversations with our demons on the course. We've talked a lot on this show about how to train for the Leadville 100. You know, what kind of workouts you need, how to eat and drink properly, what gear you need, how to crew, but we've never really deep dived into how to mentally prepare. So we've talked about how mentally challenging this race is, of course, but we have not taken on how to train your brain for this race. That changes in this episode and with our next guest.
Dr. Justin Ross is a clinical psychologist out of Denver, specializing in athletes' mental health and performance. Dr. Ross is not only a practitioner, but he also practices what he preaches. He's an 11-time marathon finisher, including a sub-3 hour. He's done 2 70.3 triathlons. This year, he's doing the Silver Rush, the LT 100, and then the Boston and London marathons. And he's here to share with us his sports psychology skills for a better Leadville.
There's a big mental component to racing at that elevation. It's sort of a different kind of suffering. I think anyone can do it. It's more just a matter of like if whether or not you embrace that or if it kind of freaks you out.
Dr. Justin Ross, great to have you on the show. I have a question for you. Why do we do this race?
Oh man, what a great question, right? We do this race because we want to see what we're made of, right? We take on these big endurance challenges because I think so much of it for us is it offers this opportunity at poking at our own self-discovery, to see what happens in a moment of challenge, to see how far we can push our limits, and to really see what these experiences are like, both in body but also in mind. This is a spiritual journey for a lot of people, myself included.
So, is that healthy?
It's a great question. It, like all things, it can be. It also cannot be, depending on how far, how big of an impact this has. I do think there's something really beautiful about chasing limits and about putting ourselves in challenging situations to really, again, discover what it is that we're made of and discover what happens in those times of difficulty and discomfort. You know, for so many of us, our lives, our daily lives, our 9 to 5 are relatively comfortable. And I think a big part of why we chase down endurance goals like this is because we need a little bit of that in our lives. We need a little bit of grit. We need a little bit of discomfort. And in doing that in running shoes or on a bike or in other ways, it really offers us that opportunity for exploration.
Yeah. I will say that when I think about upcoming Leadville, or when I think about important moments when racing the Leadville 100, it is not the part between Pipeline and Twin Lakes Dam that I think about, right? I think about climbing the Goat Trail. I think about climbing the Powerline. I think about descending the Powerline, the parts where I am very uncomfortable. And yeah, those are the things that motivate me and that I love telling stories about. So I think you're exactly right there. But Leadville racers, I would guess, most of us don't know a lot about what performance psychology even is. So what do we need to know about performance psychology? And I mean, what can it do for us?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I tend to think that, you know, the moments that matter on the bike actually occur the 6 inches between your ears. And it's not just those difficult parts of the course. It's your relationship, the story you tell yourself, your cognitive appraisals, those messages about what you're seeing, what you're experiencing that really impact what happens next. So the general idea around performance psychology, it's this understanding of our own relationship with those moments. And those moments can be a moment of discomfort physically. It can be in our relationship with the numbers that we're seeing on our bike computers or on our watches. It really is this tipping point of impacting what we do next. And if we have these narratives or this self-appraisal or these underlying beliefs that we can't do challenging things, when challenge comes, it's going to really impact our decision making, whether we speed up, continue to have high effort, or slow down, or maybe even stop. So performance psychology is really about understanding, the internal game that comes to sport and leveraging some of those skills that are happening already. Your mind is already at work in terms of what you're focusing on, what you're thinking about. It's leveraging what's already happening to get the most out of your experience, to not only perform well, but also to enjoy the day, because ultimately that's what this is about. In some way, shape, or form, it's about enjoying the experience.
Most of us will and should, and Fatty and I have told participants of the Leadville 100 to do this, and that is set some type of finish line goal, whether that be sub 9, sub 12, sub 13, whatever it is. I mean, I went to the first Leadville 100 and didn't have one. I went there with this vague goal, like, well, I could, maybe I'll do a sub 10. I don't know. Maybe I'm good enough for a sub 9. I don't know. I went in there with an I don't know, right? So one side of that, of course, is training and being ready physically, but mentally, first of all, how do you deal with goals? How should you set them? Is it healthy to set them? And what's the right way to set a goal like that, a time goal?
Yeah, great question. I think goals are really important, and we could break them down. So the first thing to think about is what you're describing as an outcome goal, right? An outcome goal is very specific, right? It's a time that you're shooting for. For those who have raced before, it may be setting your eyes on a PR, right? An outcome goal either happens or it doesn't. It's specific, right? And so we need that. That's really important. There's actually this really amazing study that was done that looked at 10 million marathon finishing times over a 30-year period, right? So it's this huge data set. And they plotted these marathon finishers just to see where their times fell. And there are these huge numbers, these huge bands of folks who are finishing right before really specific times. So 4 hours is the biggest one. And there were like 180,000 people who finished a marathon in the 3 minutes just before 4 hours compared to the 3 minutes just after 4 hours. It's not because people are somehow better at running a 3:57 versus a 4:02 marathon. It's because in relationship to those outcome goals, we're going to push ourselves if those outcome goals really matter. We're going to do that both in training, right? We're going to take on more of that challenge. We're not going to give up when we have a hard effort or a hard set. And also when the day is happening and we're looking at where we're at on the course and we're looking at our pacing, our strategy is going to be impacted. Below outcome goals, so we have to also think about what we call performance standards. So performance standards are just underneath an outcome goal. They're still specific, but they're not based on achieving an outcome per se. Performance standards are what I really try to guide most athletes towards focusing on because they're going to be the approach for how you show up no matter what's happening. Now, the problem with an outcome goal, especially for a race like Leadville, is there are a million things that could throw a wrench in your race day plans. And if you are so hung up on an outcome goal and you don't have the ability to kind of bounce back and think about just performing, it could really drive you crazy, right? Because your outcome goal may be out of reach for a number of reasons. Could be a mechanical thing, could be a weather thing, could be a GI thing, who knows? So performance standard is something we can do regardless of what's happening. Performance standard is a set of principles that you live by in terms of how hard you're going to push when you're uncomfortable. And I love that standard for endurance sports, especially for a race like Leadville, because it's a matter of when you get uncomfortable, not if, and what you do in that moment that is ultimately going to shape your performance come race day.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Phil Guyman. I watch a lot of his videos, and he sort of talks about something that is kind of similar to what you're describing. He calls them process goals. He says, I don't like time goals. I like process goals, where you are going to work in a certain way and become better in a certain way. Is that similar to what you're describing, or are they adjacent or somehow different from each other?
Yeah, they're very close. I think you could insert process goals even one level before performance standards. Process goals are 100% within your control day in, day out. So this is the process in which you're going to engage in order to get to your performance standards, in order to hopefully help you achieve your outcome goals. So process goals, you could break down daily or weekly, right? So my process goals for this week are going to look like this amount of volume, this amount of intensity. It's going to look like this type of mental skills work that I'm going to do. It's going to look at my recovery methods, my nutrition, my strength training. Your process goals are really the day in, day out approach to what you're doing that's going to ultimately set you up for success.
I love that. So we can set process goals and a performance standard, and that's going to lead us to hopefully the very best possible day, the very best possible time that we could get in Leadville or in any race, right? So I want to get a sense from you what our listeners might be able to institute, what they might be able to implement on their own. What are a couple of things that what are process goals? What are performance standards that we can set to have a better day on the course?
Yeah, great question. I really think that the work is understanding that process goals are going to allow you to have the best opportunity to achieve an outcome goal. And knowing that those outcome goals are, if everything goes according to plan, they're reachable, but there are things that could get in the way ultimately of achieving that standard. So I think about process goals as you have to break them down into a couple of categories. So the first is thinking about what it is that your weekly bike training plan looks like, right? How much time, how much intensity, how much elevation gain, what are the daily, weekly process goals that you're going to focus on in terms of your overall time on the bike. You also need to think about process goals for strength training, for your nutrition approach, and for mental skills development. I'm a big believer that every single workout that we have gives us an opportunity to work on something in the mental game. And you don't need to spend the entirety of your workout, but if you can dedicate 5 minutes or 10 minutes to your workout to working on some aspect of this mental skills development from a process goals perspective, it's going to ultimately help you with the outcome goals, right? Performance standards then it's the approach that you're going to take as you're going through your training. And I think the biggest performance standard that we need to think about developing is this idea of what are you going to do in a moment of challenge, right? How do you want to show up when that occurs? That's a performance standard that you can easily work on identifying and tweaking as you go about, right? So I think the best performance standard that we have is matching effort and attitude with the intensity of what's required in that moment. Right? So we can always control our effort, right? We can always control our attitude. And those are the things that ultimately rob us the most. When we get frustrated, when we get discouraged, when we feel like our outcome goals are out of reach, and we get frustrated and we say, oh, the hell with it, I'm just gonna back down here because who cares anyway? That's a performance robber. So those are the moments that we really need to work on the most.
I've done that. At Leadville. Oops. Oh, no, It didn't end well. It ended with me pulling out at Twin Lakes. So it wasn't a good moment for me. I've been there. And I'm going to get to one of those challenge moments in a second, Doctor. Kind of in an interesting way, too. But first, I want to ask you about training, since you brought training up. Trainers tell us all the time that there's no need to go out and do the 100-mile training ride prior to the Leadville Trail 100 race. That training is this cumulative process, and they should skip those big rides and instead go to the starting line and, quote unquote, trust their training. And I totally buy into this, but I also understand what the racer is going to and what the racer is doing in doing a 100-mile training ride, and that is confidence. They want to know before the LT100 that they can do it. In other words, they can ride 100 miles. And even if it's no good for us on a training level, they want that confidence, right? So where does confidence come from, and how do we get it without doing it?
Yeah, it's huge, right? Confidence is so important in terms of athletic performance. And I'm a big believer that confidence really only comes in two forms. So the first is you have to do challenging things. You have to have this experience, this firsthand, direct experience of doing something of challenge. The second place is then having this credible self-talk about what you've done, right? This reminder that I have done challenging things already, and in doing so, I can trust that I'm going to be able to do it again, right? So this whole idea of trust your training is sort of a tried and true concept that we hear a lot of. And I think the general idea is great, but I think it could be a bit lacking. I always try to guide athletes back to, we need to have 3 layers of trust that can help us. We use trust because trust is ultimately the offset to anxiety. We're going to feel race day anxiety. That is a common experience, and we can't just push it away. We have to understand that race day anxiety is a completely normal human experience that occurs when sort of 3 things come up for us. So the first is when we don't have predictability or certainty, right? When we're not really sure what this thing is going to look like or feel like, that's going to be the first building block for anxiety. The second is not having control, right? I don't know what's going to happen when I get out there. I can't absolutely just control the outcome of the day. So that's part 2. And the third is a threat to something that we care about. And for so many of us, it's not just a threat to our race day outcome, but it's a measure of our identity. We put so much of our identity into our race day performance that it's not the race day that feels threatened, it's our identity if we don't perform well. So the deeper the level of our identity threat, the higher the level of anxiety. So we can offset that through this platform of building trust. So 3 layers of trust that I think are really important for each and every one of us. The first is you have to trust something specific about your training. This is why keeping, records or logs about what you've done in training it's so important. You need to go back and you need to trust something specifically about what you've done. That could be total volume, total hours, total climbing, the long rides that you did do. They may not have to be, a 10-hour day or a 100-mile day, but you have to go back in your training and remind yourself. You have to trust that you've done the work to be prepared. The second layer then is you have to expand that and broaden that and trust something about your life as an athlete, more generally speaking. Now, most of us, a lot of us racing Leadville have done other events. Maybe it's Leadville previously. Maybe it's, for me, running events. It could be anything that you can go back to remind yourself of all the moments in your athletic history and career that have allowed you to get through hard moments. And that is going to help you be reminded that you can do it again today. And then the last is you broaden that even further out, and you have to trust something about what you've been through as a human being, right? We've all been through adversity and hardship and difficulties and trauma just on a human level. And it's the reminder that we are remarkably resilient in life, and we've been through all kinds of challenges, and here we are. We're still standing, we're still pushing, we're still looking at high achievement. And when we do that, we don't take anxiety away, but we can offset it by reminding ourselves, by trusting that we are prepared in mind, in body, and in history.
Okay, you also talked about pushing through tough moments, and I think one of the easy things to do when this happens, those tough moments during the race, is to, of course, rely on Ken Klober. Now, Ken, I think, is part race organizer, part miner, part cowboy, part psychologist, right? With his "you got to dig deep" speeches and all that stuff. And it's quite useful. But for those that maybe don't know how to dig deep, I found this really fascinating, that the University of Kiel found that swearing, and I don't mean swearing on a stack of Bibles, I mean using cuss words, can actually help athletes push through tough moments. They put some athletes on stationary bikes and found that those that dropped the occasional F-bomb were able to put out an extra 24 watts. Now, this study, I don't know, who knows how valid their work was, but I think the point here is, Doctor, is that diversionary, is this kind of some type of diversionary trick we can play on our minds, or is telling ourselves to dig deep or dropping the F-bomb or whatever it may be something else at play?
Yeah, no, I love that, right? And the truth is there's a lot of studies like this that are trying to look at these little factors that can help us get through those tough moments. And there are studies like that show that swearing, right, this outward expression of frustration, can help temporarily. Right, it's not going to help you for 9 hours if you're dropping F-bombs for 9 hours straight. But in moments of frustration or pain, to let it out can be really, really helpful. And there's a number of ways we think about these types of skills. We sometimes talk about this. We call them associative strategies and dissociative strategies. Right, so associative strategies are the things that you're going to be doing sort of like internally. Right? These approaches that you have in your thoughts and your cognitive appraisal, this self-talk that you're going through. But we also have these dissociative strategies, which are kind of distraction-based, right? One of the things that can really trip us up is our relationship with pain. And Leadville is all about experiencing our relationship with pain and discomfort. And if we get too hung up on it, if we focus too much on that discomfort, and we have this story in our minds about what we can or cannot do and we're uncomfortable, and those stories are negative, you see why so many people can struggle towards the end of long efforts. So finding these dissociative strategies of distraction or of having an outward expression of frustration, anything like that you find to be helpful is going to be helpful come race day, and you can start to play with that now in your training.
Yeah, I have so many times, every year at some point, I utter the words, "I have no business being on this course." Every time. For 23 times, I have at some point thought, I shouldn't be here. I don't belong here. And yet, and that's always at the low point of the race. It makes me wonder, am I thinking that? at the low point of the race, or am I having a low point of the race because I'm letting myself think that, right? There's sort of a dog chasing its tail moment there. But how do you pull yourself out of that downward spiral? How do you keep yourself from going down that rabbit hole?
Maybe you can't, and maybe you shouldn't try. And I know that sounds kind of goofy, but I have this weird idea, right? Like as an adult, if you want to learn a second language, the first thing that you don't do is you don't try to unlearn English, right? And in fact, you can't, right? You don't try to unlearn English in order to speak Spanish. And yet what I hear so many people do in this psychological skill development is they want to unlearn something that they've been doing. And we just can't do it. I think the better strategy is recognizing like those moments are going to happen, right? You're going to have those moments of deep questioning. I do it too. I do a lot of my long rides early morning to not disrupt my family time. And it'll be 5:30 in the morning, 5 a.m. and I'm out and it's dark and it's cold. And I almost always have that thought of like, what the hell am I doing out here? I should be in bed where it's warm and comfy, right? Well, it's a matter of how long you stay there that really matters. And if you can be aware of those thoughts, if you can let them in and then just not let them stick around for a long time by refocusing on something else, by reminding yourself that you've had that thought 23 times before and it's part of race day and it doesn't have to blow you up, well, that's probably more important than trying to get rid of the thought in the first place.
Acknowledge it, understand it. Yeah, that makes great sense. What are other strategies, both during the race and before the race? Because I mean, our mantra here in this podcast is, practice what you're going to do, right? We're constantly talking about practice your nutrition, do your long rides, and there should be nothing new that happens on race day. We haven't really talked about your mind and how you need to practice, I guess, a racer's endurance mindset before race day. What can we do to practice and become, I guess, stronger or more prepared for this, this race that is, I think, truly 80% mental, and be successful at it?
Yeah, this is a test of human fortitude, no doubt, both physically but also mentally. And you're right. I mean, we've all said this, right? Don't do anything new on race day. Well, that applies to your mental skills as well. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with an athlete who reaches out to me a week or two before their A event in whatever endurance sport. And they said, all right, I'm ready to get to work. Let's get me ready for race day. And the question always back is, well, what have you been doing for the last 6 months? Right? Let's start there. The truth is how you show up in Leadville mentally starts now. You do it in your day in, day out process of training. And you have to start by first being aware of what's already happening in your thoughts. Right? So we could start with every day when you come back and you log your ride, you log what happened, you need to be paying attention to where your mind went. So what happens when it's kind of an easier effort, just kind of an aerobic pace? What happens when you're out there for a long period of time, right? What happens when you have higher intensity workouts? What's the self-talk that just automatically floats through your thinking, right? Let's start with that. Let's be aware of that so that we can practice some specific skills. Now, there are some specific skills that I think are really, really important. The first is this whole idea of mental toughness, which gets talked about a ton. I'm a big believer that mental toughness is really just our approach to doing hard things. And each and every one of us should be tasked with creating our own definition of what mental toughness is and means, and the skills that we're going to draw upon when we need to engage in mental toughness. These are self-talk skills. There's a lot of research that shows that there's this difference in our self-talk between I language versus you language, right? So you can practice these skills. The I language are self-talk statements like, I got this, I'm doing great, I can continue, versus the you statements, which are, you got this, you're a badass, you can keep going. The research really shows that once you shift into that you voice, you're going to be able to have higher level of perceived exertion and put out more energy output, whether that's on a bike or in your running shoes, than when you're in the I language. The challenge is doing that at the right moments, right? You can't be in a you-based self-talk the entire race, but you do that on the second half to really motivate yourself for specific moments of challenge to get through those tough moments, both on the course, but also psychologically.
Awesome. Second person for the second half. I love it. So at the Columbine turnaround, you can turn around and start calling yourself you.
Yeah, and really dialing it in and practicing that now. Like, practice what you want to say to yourself in your training rides now so that it's easily recalled when you need it on the second half of race day.
Dr. Justin, I want to talk about motivation here real quick. Regarding motivation and how to get yourself, a lot of people like to get themselves pumped up, whether it be for race day or for a training session. For race day, one of the things that Fatty and I have always talked about here is breakfast, and that food is mood, and that having a good breakfast and having what you like at breakfast will put you in a good mood as you head to the start line at Leadville. Another thing people try to use, I think, a lot, and that is backed by research and science, and that is music. Like, they'll put music on, they'll put their favorite songs on, either while they're riding or before they go out in a race to help get themselves pumped up. And this is backed by research. Like, there's been a lot of research. The Sports Journal, in fact, reviewed a bunch of stuff about using music and athletic motivation and found that people had more motivation, they were better synchronized during their efforts, more muscle recruitment, they stay in the moment better. Now, Leadville, as far as I know, I checked the rule book, doesn't allow headphones during the race itself. So listening to music, while not totally prohibited, you probably get some frowns from your competitors if you're rolling down the trail with a set of AirPods in and blasting music and not paying attention. But you're certainly free to use music, obviously, before the race or during your training sessions. So, Dr. Ross, is this a real thing? Like, can we find these motivators? Is music, is food, can we use these things to help us should we even be pumping ourselves up before big efforts like this?
Absolutely. And I think it's really about getting the right fit, right? So you don't want to be too amped up before you get started. And so often we need to sort of like calm ourselves down, right? To get ourselves in that right performance zone. There are typically a few things that we know immediately can change our moods. One of them is music, right? And this has been well documented in all kinds of different ways. So music is a mood changer, right? The second is laughter, right? And this is why I think it's so important to be around your people come race day, right? So to be around your family, your friends, your fellow racers, getting in the corral, having conversations with people, right? Finding those moments of levity and humor can really help with that energy system as well. And the last is movement. Right. And one of the things that we get kind of antsy about is we're prepared to move and we're tapered and we feel fresh and we're just kind of waiting. Right. And we're waiting in that anxiety place of, I don't know what this is going to be like. I don't know how I'm going to perform. And we get amped up. Right. So finding those factors to help us dance through it, to get ourselves in that optimal place to get started is really important. Food's important too, right? And I think so much of what I'm learning as I'm preparing for Leadville myself is it's a trial and error game for me going about this the first time, finding what works on the bike, but being really ritualistic about using those things that you know that work, having that routine that helps you stay grounded and present focused, really important in the process.
Yeah, Fatty, it's funny. Some of the research about music actually points out the use of playlists. Like, you got to pick the right songs. I got a good laugh out of Melissa, when we interviewed her. She said she uses Cowboys from Hell from Pantera. I mean, that's a thrashing metal song, but, if it does her good, like if it improves her performance, that's all that matters there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like your point about laughter as well, Dr. Justin. This is at the starting line. You have such a great opportunity, as we've mentioned in the course segments this year, to make allies, to essentially find folks who are going to be riding with you through the day. That laughter, that forming of a camaraderie, it doesn't just set you up for success on the course, it sets you up for good success in your head. And I mean, which really the two things sort of merge into one thing at some point. So I love that, a really good piece of advice. Now, I know you're giving a ton of advice to people who are racing the Leadville 100 this year. I know that last year you did you did some help with the ground up contest racers, and you're helping again this season. I'm were there main points that you emphasized to the racers last year that you think would be worth sharing here?
So from the ground up is this amazing project, right? That I really think and it makes me think about even the starting corral that we're talking about here too, right? That there's such deep human connection about these events, right? Because we're all we're all wanting to experience very similar things, right? We all do this because in some way, shape, or form, we want to test these limits and we want to see what's possible for ourselves. And it binds us to our other athletes. And I think there's something beautiful about that. The truth is the work that we do with, relative beginners and from the ground up to everyday athletes who've done this before, to those performing on the world stage when I'm working with the NFL or the NBA or professionals or Olympians, the truth is the work is really all the same, right? The mental approach is no different from somebody who's been doing this for 20 years and getting paid to do it compared to somebody who's just getting started. Now some of the specifics behind it may differ, but the mind works very much the same. Anxiety is almost always rooted in the same thing, right? Lack of confidence is almost always rooted in the same thing. So the truth is the mental approach doesn't really differ that much. Now, what happens is the people who get the most out of themselves are the ones who've learned how to adopt these skills in their training in that process-oriented way, that they have that performance standard, that they can do something actionable when they get tired or they start to drift. And that gives them the best chance to reach their outcome. Whether that outcome is, trying to hit the podium or just trying to sneak in and get a belt buckle at 11 hours and 59 minutes.
One of the hardest things I dealt with at Leadville, Doctor, was not so much the race itself, although I had my issues there too, was actually post-race. Like coming down off of Leadville was always a 2-3 week struggle for me. Nothing seemed to be as good or as cool. I was so full of euphoria after the race that nothing, regular life just didn't match up, right? So do you have any tools there to help people kind of come off that high that they'll probably experience at Leadville?
It's a great point, and it really needs to be validated first and foremost that it's really common, right? So we think about big events like this. We sometimes talk about them through the psychological idea of these are peak experiences. For many, racing Leadville is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And it takes months to prepare, both in mind and body. And because it has such strong emotional intensity, that when it's over, we often feel this huge emotional letdown, right? Now, there's the physical side of that, right, which we're probably exhausted. There's the mental side of it, too. We can't discount just how mentally draining focusing for 10 plus hours is. But then there's this letdown of it's over, right? And it's really common. We actually did a bit of work last year with the New York Times on this very concept around marathon season. Marathon running is the world's largest amateur participation event, right? There's just hundreds of thousands of people who do this every year. And it's a really common human experience that once the race is over, there's this post-marathon blues, right? It's almost like this mini depression where people are kind of questioning what's next, right? I just did this peak experience and now I don't know what to look for. I don't know what to focus on. Nothing has as much excitement anymore. And it can be really uncomfortable. So I think the first step really is recognizing it's completely normal. And in some ways it's to be expected. And you have to treat that for a week or 2, or sometimes even up to a month as part of this process of chasing down really deep, meaningful events.
Yeah, no question. As Hadi was describing that feeling, I was like, oh yeah, I recognize that. So yeah, just knowing that that's coming and that it's normal is, I think, a really important thing. Now, you are, of course, racing the Leadville 100 yourself this year. And will this be your first Leadville 100?
It's my first shot at Leadville, yes.
All right. So obviously, you are not just a doctor, you are a patient of yours. Right. So what are the things that you are doing for yourself to get yourself mentally ready for this race?
Well, there's some practical things, first and foremost, right? Just some basic training things that I'm leaning on my community for. And some of those things are really nutrition. I'm asking my friends who are racing, who've done this before, advice on how to plan for that and how to prepare for that and what to be focused on. The other, from the mental side, is really just working on the mental game of getting comfortable being out there for an extremely long period of time. Now, the longest race I ever did was a half Ironman that took me just a bit over 5 hours. So I'm looking at easily doubling that. And I don't know what happens after 5 hours in my mind. So I need to get accustomed to that. I need to spend some time actually experiencing that to get a better feel of the specific skills that I'm going to need come race day. Now, for me, I've done a lot of other events. I've done a bunch of marathons. I've run a bunch. I've ridden bikes for quite a while. So I have some familiarity with these skills. And of course, the work that I do, I talk about them all the time. So for me, it's about really engaging in those mental toughness skills. It's about learning how to shift my focus and my energy as we go about the day, learning how to mentally recover on places on the course where I can let go of that deep focus and just allow a little bit of reset. Those are really important skills that I'm working on right now.
Doctor, if you were the host of this show and you read the line, "This is the show that builds up, gets you ready, freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country," would you get rid of that line, or is that okay? Because we've said it for 5 seasons now.
I love it, right? Because it honors all parts of the day, right? There should be a big part of this that builds you up, but there should be a big part of this that freaks you out, right? Because this is a huge challenge. And if you're not prepared in mind and body, it can be devastating, right? And we've seen that happen. And so you have to balance both the excitement and the challenge with building you up with the honest realization of what you're getting yourself into in order to be prepared, right? It's not intended to freak people out to the point of disrupting them. It's to get them ready, right? To let people know this is what you're getting yourself into. And these are going to be the skills in your body and your nutrition, but also in the mental game so that you can not only get through the day, but again, hopefully you can enjoy the day, right? This process of self-discovery it's a really beautiful thing, and we don't get it in many other places in our adult lives. So finding that to be, exciting and challenging, absolutely where we need to be with this.
Love it. So where can folks go to learn more?
There's all kinds of places to learn about this. So there's a couple of books that I recommend. The first is called Endure by Alex Hutchinson, who he's been writing about this type of work for a long time. The book is phenomenal. It really breaks down this model we call the biopsychosocial model or the psychobiological model of endurance performance, and will give you some really tangible ideas for how to implement this in your training. But it's also written in just a really fun way. So there's all kinds of cool stories in there. The other book that I really like is called How Bad Do You Want It? By Matt Fitzgerald. And that's sort of each chapter talks about a specific endurance-based story and embeds some sports psychology component into it. It's a fantastic read as well. And then for other podcasts that people may want to look at, there's a podcast by Michael Gervais, who's a well-known performance psychologist, called Finding Mastery. And there's a number of really great interviews on there from people in business and in sports and in human performance that really dial into these concepts.
Fantastic recommendations. And I might add one more, drjustinross.com.
I love it, man. Thanks. You could, feel free to reach out. Be happy to chat with you about getting your mind dialed in to perform at your peak.
Big thanks again to Dr. Justin Ross. Like we said, you can find more on this topic at drjustinross.com.
We talk a lot about the Feed's nutrition lineup, and of course, it is top-notch. But one thing that gets overlooked, and that is the Feed's stellar catalog of recovery tools. And we're not talking recovery nutrition here. We're talking about foam rollers and handheld massaging aids and leg recovery systems. The Feed has an entire page on its website devoted to recovery gear.
I am going to need to spend some time on that page. Cody Wade has me doing some very tough intervals right now, and my old body needs all the help it can get to bounce back. And that's exactly why the Feed has included this stuff in its lineup. Fueling your workouts is incredibly important, but if you can't bounce back, it's all for naught.
2 items in particular I keep at the ready, a foam roller and one of those massage sticks. The roller mostly stays at home in front of the TV, although it is small enough to take with me if I wanted to. The massage stick is definitely travel-worthy, even on a plane. Fatty, though, I think I see you in a pair of those Normatec leg recovery boots. Feet up, legs wrapped in 2 air compression boots, TV on. Now that's pro.
I will tell you, Hottie, it would not be hard for you to see me in those because I have a pair of those. They are wonderful. I love them. It's a pricey recovery item, and it's still worth it as far as I'm concerned. It was a birthday gift a couple of years ago from Lisa. We'd encourage you to make recovery a big part of your Leadville training. And if you need a little gear to help with that, head over to the feed, see what they have.
Claim your $80 annual credit at thefeed.com/Leadville. Register your email, verify your phone number, then spend your first feed credit of $20 right away. All right, let's wrap this episode. Again, thanks to Dr. Justin Ross for setting our minds straight. Fatty and I are on social media. On Twitter, it's @FatCyclist, and on Instagram, it's @MichaelHoughton. Of course, we are both on the Facebook Leadville 100 Mountain Bike page. And if you want to have a conversation, join our Slack channel. You'll find a link over at leadville.fm/Slack.
If you like this show, go wherever you listen. Give us a 5-star rating. Write us a review. See all the ways you can find the show over at leadville.fm.
Yeah, please tell your racing friends too. That's actually the very nicest thing you can do to help us spread the word about our independent podcast.
Yeah, leave a review, please. We're very needy people. We want your approval.
Feed our egos, please.
Please.
Please. Good luck in your riding, racing, and recovery. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the starting line.
And probably at the fishing hatchery, too.